here's the opening I was telling you about in the side of the sleeve. As you can see, it's not a straight closed opening, and that will be shown here in the Donegal's Giermark when we get to it. It has a it's meant to be decorative. Yes, you can close it, but it's really meant to show off the underlying garment so that you can better lust after the obvious wealth that the owner has. You can clearly see here the rows of braid, and that's petlakami that they have going on either side of this sleeve. Petlakami is a system of braid and closures that were used here to close jupons. And it's got 3 buttons here in the middle that you can see hanging down. There is also a matching 3 studs on either side of it and some tassels, both front and back, that help finish the decoration. Now I'm going to go ahead and advance this so you can see the closings at the bottom of this. And I'm going to apologize in advance for the poor film quality, poor color quality of this. There's not a lot you can do. It was shot on awful 1970s Soviet era film that was just horrible in watered out looking negative quality film for the poor Polish directors. And it wasn't until Jerzy Hoffman in the fall of the Iron Curtain in the late 80s and early 90s that we actually got some decent looking films. Anyway, that's my opinion. On to the next. One other thing I wanted to point out is that it's very difficult to see here, but if you look closely you can see there is no back seam on this back piece. It's all one single piece of fabric, which is important to remember. Remember how I said earlier that the Poles had a lot of money because they were flush with cash? Well, this was one way they did it. The wealthier you were, the less you wanted to be seen having anything that looked like it had been darned or mended, because you wouldn't want to be caught dead in something that looked like it had been a hand-me-down if you were a rich noble. And so likewise, they didn't really want to, the richer they were, the more they didn't want to piece together things. The Poles did have access to looms that were this big, and they had the money to be able to afford to throw away enough fabric to make these big cuts of fabric out of single pieces here. And so before we go on to the side opening, I just wanted to show that to you. Here's from this movie. The pattern of closures on this Giermark don't appear to be the same as like on the sleeves. For example, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the braid and the buttons he's got on his left arm. But if you look, the little flash of red in the bottom right-hand part of the frame here, that's his knee sticking out. There's a little flash of red right there. That shows the opening, the slit there in his Giermark. He doesn't appear to have any of the same kind of braid and closure things that you see on his left sleeve, but it's perfectly appropriate and period to put the same kind of closures right there if you want. This shows up much clearer in the famous painting of Rembrandt's Polish Rider. So if you look that up, you can see it in his Gambesson Jupon. You can see that riding slit that he's got there. And this shows up here as well. And in a moment here, I'm going to show you some woodcuts that have the pattern of closures from the sleeve replicated on these riding slits. So give me a moment and I'll show you that too. Okay, back to the books. Before I show you the woodcut, I wanted to show you something else here too. Here's one of those famous, or rather infamous, Osprey books that so often get people in trouble in A&S competitions. It's not enough to use these as your documentation. These are great secondary and possibly tertiary sources. They can be used as primary sources, and I'm going to show you how. One thing you need to be aware of, though, with these Osprey books is that they're uneven quality across the series. The Polish Army's books and the other one here, the Polish Winged Hussar books, after looking at all the different extant objects I've seen on different museum websites and paintings and woodcuts I've seen in other books, for example, the famous Paprocki woodcuts that you can Google up. These books are very well done and are very reliable. Now, having said that, look at this hussar on the front cover and his helmet. On an email that I'm on, let me back up here. On an email list I'm on, the author of this book, Brzezinski, said that he had regretted this painting that made it as the cover, because that helmet was based on some early research he had done, and had communicated to the painter, Angus McBride. And it turns out that his Brzezinski's research head was wrong about this helmet. So this is an incorrect helmet on the cover of this book. And unfortunately, as Brzezinski mentioned, because these books don't go into very high print runs, he's stuck with this painting, on it until people buy enough of these books that it forces a second printing. At which case, he might be able to change this painting and get rid of that erroneous helmet on this hussar. Having said that, here's how you can use these Osprey books. Quite often, they are loaded with photographs of extant objects. And if you want to use these in your A&S competition, then use them to cite the photo of the extant object. In this case, this chapeau de fer helmet that has been turned into a lobster pot helm. That was recovered off a wagon load of those they found in the Vistula River. Here also is a period woodcut of a Polish hussar recruiting painting done in the 1620s. So if you wanted to cite that as a part of one of your sources, you could. You just have to make sure that you cited it the proper way. All right, enough of that. What I really wanted to show you in here was this. This is Abraham de Bruyn's, part of his Habits of Diverse Nations, published in 1581. Now, if you look on these, you can see here that there are rows of closures done in the braid that you just saw in the movie. They might be hard to make out. I'm having a hard time seeing them through this lens. I'm hoping they show up when I view the final edit of this, if you want to call it an edit. But you can see, for example, let's look at the bottom three figures here on the right. They have bunches of rows of braids from top to bottom on this, and it shows its part of its melding process with the Hungarian menta, which has that very distinctive hem in the front, the different length hem in the front and back. You see that in the guy in the middle here, these three that I'm pointing the camera at? That's very characteristic of a Hungarian menta, as are the rows of braid enclosures being done like this. Those, again, the Hungarians, pardon me, I'm still getting over my cold. The Hungarians borrowed that from their Ottoman allies and erstwhile friends and captors. You can also notice that the figure at the very far right, this guy here, has a sash around his waist. Again, it's another thing brought over from the Turks. Now I'll show you another book here. The newer addition to the Polish Winged Army set, and this one that came out in the last couple of years by Brzezinski. Again, this has got a little bit better. You can see the lines here of the braid a little bit better. Let me see if I can catch this in the light better. If you look on his leg there, you can see the closure that has been closed, rather the slit in his gearmock that's been closed with the Petlakami braid. Whoops, let's try that. It'll be blurry, but you can see where the rows are supposed to be. And if you Google up Abraham de Bruyn, that's Abraham, D-E-B-R-U-Y-N, and woodcut, if you Google that up, you'll be able to see some excellent additions, or excellent examples of his work. Finally, to get back to the gearmock, I want to show you this here. This is a very famous painting done by Marcin Kolber of Stefan Batory. This is the very first painting done in the Polish traditional style. The Persian elements are here to see if you know what to look for. Again, this is based off the kaftan. They're closed right over left, as you can see. That's again something that's a nod to their Oriental heritage. It's a very simply cut garment. There's only 7 pieces in them total, if you count the different front and backs and sleeves and collars. So they're not terribly complicated. So guys, if you don't have much luck sewing, this is the first garment for you to do. And in fact, a jupon was my first garment, so they're fairly easy to do.